Well, welcome everybody to Retire Well, the podcast where we explore how to plan, invest, and live well in retirement. I'm Jim Smith.
And I'm Martin Fox. Together we'll be exploring how to make your money work for you, as well as how to live a purposeful and healthy life from midlife and beyond.
So coming today, we're delighted to be joined by relationship and sex therapist, Jo Robertson.
In today's conversation, we will be talking about the following with Jo: how relationships evolve through midlife and beyond, intimacy and connection, communication, dating later in life, and why emotional connection can be just as important as financial security in your retirement. You know, Jim, when people think about retirement planning, they tend to think about KiwiSaver investments and whether they'll have enough money.
Yes, very few people sit down with their financial advisor and say, hey, could we also discuss your emotional connection and sex life?
Which is probably just as well.
Though if someone did ask me that, though, I'd be referring them to Jo and not you.
Yeah, well, I think that's a very wise professional decision.
But it's interesting. I mean, people spend decades planning financially for retirement, yet they often spend very little time thinking about what happens to their relationships once work's out of the picture.
Yeah, all of a sudden you're spending a lot more time together.
Which sounds wonderful in theory.
Until you discover that your partner has been loading the dishwasher incorrectly for the last 35 years.
Or they have a completely different understanding of what retirement actually means.
Yeah, one person imagines, leisurely travel, long lunches and relaxing afternoons.
Or the others prepared a detailed spreadsheet covering every weekend for the next 10 years.
And they've colour-coded it with quarterly reviews.
The reality is, though, retirement changes much more than just your finances.
It changes routines, identities, priorities, and your relationships.
Yeah, and for many couples, it's the first time they've spent this much time together.
Which can be wonderful.
Or at the very least, educational.
And if we're fortunate enough to enjoy a long retirement, maintaining connection and intimacy becomes an important part of your overall well-being.
Yeah, because retirement isn't just about having enough money.
It's also about having someone that you still enjoy having breakfast with in the morning.
Which is exactly why we're looking forward to today's conversation.
So with that, let's welcome Jo Robertson. On today's episode, we're delighted to be joined by Jo Robertson.
Jo is a relationship and sex therapist. She's a speaker, writer, educator who helps people navigate intimacy, communication, sexuality, and relationships in a healthy and practical way. Jo, thanks very much for joining us.
You're so welcome. It's good to be talking. I appreciated the little applause there. I've never had that before.
So before we get into the conversation, would you mind sort of sharing some of your backstory and telling us a little bit about how one becomes a relationship and sex therapist?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of a weird thing to do with your life. And so that's a pretty common question, actually, is how do you end up in this place and where you talk about sex all the time? And I think going back into my childhood, the threads were already there. So I was really curious about people's relationships. As soon as I knew what sex was, it wasn't like I was running to do it. I just really wanted to understand more about it. I think I had this real drive to understand probably the secret or the darker, the kind of shadow parts of our lives. And what I know now is that sex is probably, and relationships to some extent, is the piece of our lives we often keep the most hidden. Like we don't tell our friends, we don't tell our family often what we're experiencing. The people who are having great sex, they tell everyone. But the majority of people are kind of having a trickier time. So the threads were there, or the seeds were there. And then when I was studying, I decided to teach sex education in high schools. And I really loved that time. Great questions from teenagers about sex, like always fantastic questions. And after that, I trained as a counselor. And then I decided to do my master's while I was having my kids. I have got 3 boys. And when I was trying to figure out what to study, my mum actually said, she's like, I think you should study sex. And I said, that's weird. Why? And then she said, well, you talk about it all the time. And I didn't know that, but I could see that this was this curiosity that had been there from the beginning, curious about people's relationships, about people's secrets. And then when I was doing the sex education, where do we learn about sex? Where do we get how do we form our ideas? How do our parents talk to us about sex? And how does that influence what we do when we're young and emerging? And then I went and did that. So I did my master's of sex therapy. It was a master's of science in medicine. through Sydney University. So you can't train at a tertiary level in New Zealand. You have to train overseas if you want to do the university pathway. So that's what I did. And I've specialized in a kind of a few unique spaces within the sex therapy umbrella. So that would be differences in libido, relationship breakdown, affairs and betrayal, sexual pain, and then also hormonal impacts on sex, whether that's postpartum, perimenopausal, etc.
Yeah, awesome. So one of the ideas or themes that we want to sort of touch on today is around sex and aging, and whether your sex life retires, or should your sex life retire when you do. So how does what assumptions does society generally have or still carry around intimacy and aging?
I think we go in both directions as a society. So we either think everything shuts down and is finished, like full stop at the end of the sentence, probably at about 60. I think as a society, people tend to think that's when the doors have closed, or the total opposite, in that sex should always be easy. It should be kind of really natural. It should feel really organic. And that's also not totally true. So neither extreme is helpful. And what we often get for like the majority is somewhere in the messy middle, which is sex can be a little bit more challenging for some really practical reasons. Relationship can be a little bit challenging as well for some practical reasons. But the doors to the shop don't necessarily have to close. You might want to close them, or one partner might want to and the other partner not. That's also just really normal. That happens all throughout people's relationships, not even specific to aging. So I think we tend to move in the extremes, like either it's all finished or it should just be all harmonious and awesome and easy, and neither of which is true.
Jo, how does the emotional intimacy and connection evolve as couples typically transition through midlife and beyond?
I think it's, at every stage of a relationship, you're being hit with different challenges. So probably the biggest one for people's intimacy, which is separate to their relationship, but obviously connected, is going to be hormones. I think it's going to have the largest impact, and probably the most unknown one as well, because we don't tend to get great sex education where someone says, hey, so when you're at this stage of life, this is how hormones show up or don't, and this is how you could navigate that. So for men and women, it's a little bit different. For our men, from about the age of 40, they are experiencing a 1%, it can start as early as 30, but a 1% decline in testosterone every year. So they're starting to feel like, not being a man myself, it's hard for me to describe this physiologically, but they might start to feel like they can go longer without sex. Like, I don't really think about it as often, or I'm kind of like happy with the once every 2 to 3 weeks or once a month, whereas previously I really felt like sex a lot more often. They're maybe finding erections a little bit harder to access, or finding completion, like orgasm, a little bit harder to access. We find that men's testosterone is usually peaked in the morning and then declines over the day. So this is when we think practically, like, okay, maybe you want to start having sex earlier, or maybe if you need an erection for whatever you're doing, maybe you want to do that earlier in the day rather than later. Things like food are going to have more of an impact. So a big meal is not recommended if you're finding erections or orgasm harder to access, because your body's using more energy to process the food. So that's for men. There's lots of like little things we could go into there, but I'm just scratching the surface. And then for our ladies, for our women, when they start to go through perimenopause, they're getting a real decline in their estrogen, but also in their testosterone. So women have testosterone too, which contributes to libido, but estrogen is their primary sex hormone, and that starts to decline. And if I told you, hey, your sex hormone is about to plummet through the bottom of the floor, you'd go, I think that's going to have an impact, and it definitely does. So that means that in the same way as our men, our libido is harder to access, orgasms can be harder to access, but also the skin becomes drier, which means that sex can be more painful or can feel more abrasive. And if anything is painful or abrasive, you don't want it. So like if you think about being kicked in the shins, that's painful. Your body does not crave that thing. It doesn't make sense for it to crave something that hurts, which is why we should never have painful sex, and we should always address it and not just kind of push through, which is what lots of couples do. So that's the kind of elevator pitch of hormones and how it shows up in the middle to later years.
Wow, fascinating. There's quite a bit going on there, isn't there?
Yeah. Did you know that?
No. I mean, I've heard perimenopause talked a bit about at the age group I am, and I don't really understand what it means. So yeah, it's very interesting.
I mean, so many impacts. So if you think about as well, irritability, exhaustion, if you're struggling to sleep, which also people at a later stage of life are often struggling to sleep, both men and women, then you're more lethargic, like you're struggling a little bit more in your energy. And of course, that's going to impact your intimacy and your relationship. If you're more irritated because you're more tired, you might not get along as well. And that's really, really normal. So we don't want to shame people for having that experience, but how do we navigate it?
Yeah. Jo, how do physical health changes later in life affect that intimacy? And do you think people are generally comfortable enough seeking help on this topic?
What do you think?
Probably not.
No.
Yeah. I think we all know the answer to that question. So, no, we don't tend to feel comfortable as a culture talking about sex, talking about where it's not going well. People tend to be comfortable saying when it's going well, like because our media communicates that sex should be easy and it should be theatrical and it should be fireworks all the time. So if that is what you're experiencing, then that kind of is easy to talk about. There's no embarrassment, there's no shame, and you're playing into the media's message. Like that's what is the norm. That's the message we get. If things are a bit more challenging, if you're experiencing pain, if you don't feel like sex as much, actually, particularly if you're the man, then that's really difficult to say because you're going in direct kind of contrast and violation of the mainstream social message. So it's really difficult to talk about. I forgot your first question, but I just think it's important for people. I think the heart of my work is about normalizing people's challenge. So, hey, whatever you're going through, there's been millions of people before you going through it. And there's, in New Zealand at least, like tens of thousands of you going through it right now. That's really normal. The theatrical, easy, no drama, super organic, kind of high libido partner sex life, that's actually really abnormal. There's very few of those people. Most people are walking kind of like a weird path of trying to figure things out, the messy middle.
For people listening who may be experiencing, changes physically and emotionally as they age, what reassurance or perspective would you offer them?
I would say everything can be not fixed, but everything can be navigated. So if you're in rough waters, we can figure out how to get to the other side. It doesn't make the rough waters go away, but we can figure out how to get through them. So if you're experiencing, one thing that, I haven't mentioned is that as you age, your bones become more brittle and more easily impacted by pain and your joints. And sex is like quite a physical thing. It demands quite a lot of our bodies, and being in weird positions can feel painful on our joints, or our bones can feel like a little bit more achy. That's really normal. Nothing to be embarrassed about there. Of course it would. If you're trying to be like on your knees for 15 minutes, that might be a little bit harder. And so that's okay. What we want to do then is find tools, support that are going to help, but also we want to talk about what's going to work long term. So we talk about things like sex furniture. And if you've got a sore hip or a sore knee, but you really like a particular position, that's where you access arousal or orgasm more easily, then you might want to get some sex furniture which supports that part of your body. So it's like really lovely, beautiful foam kind of tools that support a part of your body so that you can enjoy yourself. That exists.
Right.
You also might want to utilize some toys. So you might want to embrace a vibrator if arousal is harder to access. So for our women, for example, when they're going through perimenopause, when it's like, this used to like really make me feel good, or this used to work, this used to get me going, and now I'm just like not feeling it. It's tough. And my mind has gone to a different place, then you might need an extra tool, some aid. So you might want to introduce a vibrator, and there's lots of different types. I think of it as like if you hurt your back, you would use a tool to help you support your back. Like, of course you would. You would get some, tape or whatever it is that physios do. That's phenomenal. That's the same as our intimacy or our relationships. Like, let's get some tools in there to help. When it comes to vibrators, there's lots of different types, some of which, if you, for example, are struggling with your hand and dexterity, then you might want to use a larger product. There's a variety of things for every type of person and what they're struggling with. So that's my encouragement. The caveat is that all waters can be navigated. The caveat to all of that is that you have to be willing to talk about it. And you can see how detailed this conversation is already.
Yeah.
And how there are things that I can say really, really easily that would be more challenging for people who've never talked about sex before.
Yeah.
So I get that. And you've got to sign up to the process. So you've got to turn up and be willing to have the conversation if you want to navigate the waters.
Yeah, almost willing to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've really got to hear what's going on for your partner. You've got to be willing to hear how they're experiencing sex, what they're liking, what they're not liking. I mean, the goal is that where you're going with that is going to be great. You're going to get to a better outcome, but you're definitely not going to have good sex or enjoyable sex if you don't talk about it. I mean, that's a pathway to having just a more average experience.
Yeah. So retirement can often change the rhythm of a relationship, meaning suddenly couples can find themselves, spending far more time together than they have in sort of decades. What impact can that have on their lives?
Positive and negative, right? So like my husband, when he started working from home, so this is not obviously about aging, but all of a sudden we were like, wow, we see each other a lot. It meant that we never really had to organize a date night because we already talked so much. And so when we actually started when we would have a date night and get babysitters, etc., we started just inviting friends along because the goal became about fun, not about talking. And so it can have a really positive impact in that you can realize that you get to know each other really well. You're really invested in each other's life. You know what's going on for the other person. You could also find them more annoying and be thinking, wow, there's a lot of time in the next 20 years for us to spend together. And again, normalizing that, of course, you might have changed over the course of your relationship, and then now you're spending more time together. You're going, you changed in a way I did not expect. And that's okay. I really, really think in every change of season, get a third party involved. Like, talk to a therapist, talk to a coach, like whether it's for you as an individual or for you as a partnership. Get someone in there to ask you the questions, to reflect on what you want going forward, what you want your relationship to look like, start to dream again. A practical thing that would be really, really good for you to do if you're all of a sudden together a lot, or trying to reconnect, trying to even find new things to talk about if you're like Dave and I, who we talk about everything all of the time, is go and do something really new and different together. So pick up pottery class. Just go and do something completely different that you've never done before. It'll make you laugh. You'll make fun of each other. It's something to talk about, point of connection. If you want to do something that's free, if maybe resources are a little bit more challenged, then I like the idea of having a day a week, probably 2 days, where you show each other your favorite movie or documentary. Or, you go through your childhood and think, when I was 5, this was my most favorite thing to watch or listen to, or this was my most favorite book. And then almost learning about each other all over again. So just that intentional time, no matter what you're doing, bring in some fun. It doesn't have to be serious, but you are probably doing a little bit of rebuilding. Who are you going to be for the next 20 years?
Yeah. So communication seems to sit at the center of healthy relationships. What are some of the common misunderstandings that both men and women can have about each other when it comes to emotional and physical connection?
Literally everything. What is that old phrase, like, assume makes an ass out of you and me? Like, I'm just not a fan of assuming anything ever at any time. So I will always ask for clarity. I'll ask that as a therapist, but also as a partner. I'll always ask for, clarification on what they meant, what they're thinking, what they're feeling. We do this thing in our relationship called hopes and dreams. So at the beginning of a holiday, a weekend, a date night, whatever it is that we've organized that's going to be together, we talk about what each of our hopes and dreams are so that there's no assumptions. We each know what we're going into this hoping for. You might not get all of your hopes, of course, but it gives the other person an opportunity to give you what you're hoping for. I think if you live in assumptions through your whole relationship, you'll be perpetually disappointed because you're really relying on that other person being able to read your mind, and they just totally can't. They come from a different background, different family. They might have some slightly different values. They have a different personality. They just all of the things. And so you just never want to assume.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably some typical ones around intimacy would be I find that men in a heterosexual relationship typically assume that their female partner just doesn't want to have sex anymore. And then I find the opposite. So this is speaking really generally. This is like there's a whole diversity of experiences, but this is the general one. And then the female in the heterosexual relationship is thinking all he wants is sex, and it doesn't even matter really who I am. He just wants the thing.
Yeah.
Those are common assumptions that are just totally untrue. And like speaking to each of those, if somebody is showing no desire for sex, there can be so many reasons for that. We want to figure out why. It probably is that they just don't desire the sex that you were having. Like it speaks probably more to how the experience was rather than them not wanting the thing at all. They also can have a different sexual response cycle. So we've got spontaneous desire where somebody's like walking through the street, walking through the supermarket, and they are like, feel like sex. Like they have, like it just sits there and they feel like they could basically have sex at any time and be totally fine. So they could kind of get in the mood at any moment. And that's our spontaneous people. And then we've got our responsive desire people, which probably most women sit in that camp, where they don't often think about sex. But when something physical starts and their body is feeling good, they wake up. And then they're responding to the experience by then desiring the sex. So it can be that you're just dealing with a different kind of body and not that they don't want sex at all. And then the flip side is that assumption that I said about men, just like it doesn't really matter who the person is, they just want the thing. Absolutely not true. I mean, the amount of times I've had conversations with men or male partners and they've said, I just long for the connection. And I'm probably less phased about whether we have sex or not. I just want to have a shower together. I just want to touch. I just want to feel close. I want to feel wanted. So I don't mind if it's just extended kissing, but I just want to be in the moment with them and connecting. And they really desperately want it with the person they've chosen. So there's just perpetually these two basic assumptions that are being made, both of which I find the majority is untrue.
Yeah. So a lot of couples sort of avoid conversations around sort of intimacy. How can people sort of begin those conversations in a healthy way?
I mean, a couple of different ways. I guess it depends on the nature of your relationship already. So if it feels really safe, if the relationship currently feels like you are resilient to challenging conversations, you're resilient to I guess, emotional flux, like you can handle a lot in your partnership, then you can jump in there and just say, hey, how are you feeling about the sex we're having at the moment? How do you feel about our relationship? How do you feel about our intimacy? I like the idea of what I call relationship 360s, which is once a year, you just do a really good deep dive together on all the different parts of your life. So how do we feel about our finances? Like, who's spending what, and do we feel okay about it? How do we feel, obviously, with that about our saving? How do we feel about our parenting at the moment? Like, what are we doing well? What are we not doing well? And then in our relationship, our communication, our conflict, our intimacy, all of that stuff. So that's if your relationship is feeling quite resilient and strong. If you're not feeling that way, then it could be helpful to say, hey, I really want us to start talking about sex, intimacy in our relationship, but I'm worried I'm going to get it wrong. I'm really worried I'm going to say the wrong thing. I think I'm going to say something dumb, and I desperately don't ever want to hurt you because I love you so much. Would you be up for us seeing a counselor so that we can have those conversations, but in a way where we all leave just feeling really like okay? And so it's not saying, there's no blame in it. There's no you're bad at this. And every time I give you feedback, you suck at hearing it. Like, none of that. I'm worried that I'm going to mess this up. And then what's the solution? So people tend to be up for going to a counselor or trying something new if they feel like it's about a pursuit of connection. So I want you, and therefore I want to do this. That feels so much better than you're really bad at this, so I want us to try XYZ. Like, nobody feels good in that situation. We all have our primal response, which is defensiveness. And so we don't want to do blame and shame. We want to problem solve. There's an app by the Gottman Institute called Card Decks, and they have a whole range of card decks which have questions about your relationship. So good for your 360, like I said. Or if you're on a date night and you're like, hey, we spend so much time together, we have nothing to talk about, then you might want to whip it out, and you can ask questions about every part, but there's an intimacy part as a card deck focused on intimacy as well, and it'll prompt lots of great questions like, when was the best sex we ever had? Like, what's your favorite memory? Which tells a whole story, doesn't it? Like, what was it about that time that you really enjoyed? So there are some good kind of resources available if you hunt them out.
Jo, many people find themselves single again later in life through divorce, separation, or bereavement. What are some of the emotional challenges people face when re-entering the dating world?
I think the most common one I hear is the fear of rejection and fear of pain. If you're dating again mid to later life, it's because you've already felt pain.
Yeah.
You've either felt it from separation, you've felt it from betrayal, or you've felt it from death. You've already felt deep, deep wounding. And maybe you've also already had a really great love. And so there's a fear of comparison. Is anyone going to match up to the person I was with? So fear of rejection, fear of pain, fear of comparison. I think I just encourage people to be super clear about what they're wanting, so as not to hurt another person. So I've, walked this journey with clients in the past where they just want physical connection. That as a result, they need to be really honest about that with whoever it is they're dating. They don't want to remarry. They don't want to integrate someone into their family. They don't want to introduce their kids to them. They want physical connection. So that's what you need to be clear about that stuff, because we don't want to hurt each other. And then also being really honest about your fears. I think this is kind of a life lesson for all of us, is become more vulnerable. Say, hey, I'm really scared of jumping into another relationship, if that's what you want, because I think that it's going to be painful again. And I feel like you're going to reject me. I'm scared of it. I think when we are honest, we offer the opportunity for the other person to really shine. People need opportunities to shine, to show us who they are in relationships, and they can shine through our own vulnerability. If we're pretending everything's fine and we're all confident and all good, they don't get the opportunity to shine, to really show themselves. And you kind of need those moments. You need the kind of the tensions or the struggles of relationships to see who that person really is. So be vulnerable, be honest, say what you're hoping for. That's the hopes and dreams piece again. Say what you're needing out of it. And they'll show you who they are. Have you heard of Mel Robbins' Let Them theory?
No, I haven't.
She talks about like basically allowing people to show you who they are, like give them the opportunity to be seen for their values, for how they are in relationships, how they manage conflict. You're not going to know how they manage conflict unless you bring conflict to them. Allow them to show you and then offer feedback. Hey, the way that you said that, it felt XYZ. And then you're allowing them the opportunity to show you how they handle feedback.
Makes sense.
You may like that, or you may not.
Jo, what's something about relationships or intimacy that people often worry about unnecessarily?
It's a good question. I think probably it goes back to the assumptions piece. We do a lot of worrying in general that is unnecessary because we have no idea what the other person is thinking. So we're feeling rejected, we're feeling sad, we're feeling anxious, we're feeling all these things, which could be like for no reason whatsoever. Like recently, Dave was being a little bit moody, my husband, and after 3 days, I was like, are you upset with me about something? And then he said, no, not at all. And if I was a different person, I would have been stewing on that. I would have been ruminating and going like, what's happening, and assessing every part of my relationship. And did I say that bit wrong? Did I say this bit okay? When I was out later that night, was that a bit annoying? Like, processing all this stuff. And I wouldn't have needed to do that at all if I just talked, if I just said the thing that I was wondering about and allowed him to speak into it. So to give truth essentially to my worry. I think that we would reduce the world's worries in general if we just checked in a little bit more often.
Yeah, makes sense. If there was one message you would love people in midlife and beyond to understand about intimacy, relationships and connection, what would it be?
I mean, I've said this before, but that everything you're going through is normal and is common, I guess, and has been experienced by someone else before you. That seeking help can be just phenomenal. Like if you want a different outcome, you have to do something different. So if you want a better intimate life, if you want a better relationship, then you're probably going to need to seek some help, because what you've been doing to date arguably hasn't worked. So, get some help. It's the best investment you can make, is to just get that little bit of extra help for your relationship. I know that this is not about separation, but I do also deal with a lot of people who are considering separating because their relationship is so challenging or the sex life is so challenging. And I always say, getting counseling is way cheaper than divorce.
Yeah.
Like, you're either going to give a few thousand away or you're going to give away half of your assets and income. Like, it's like there's no comparison really. So you might as well invest and see what outcome you can get if you want a different kind of relationship. And then probably the last thing is just don't ever have pain. I said this before around people think they should just push through. And so it's kind of maybe a weird place for me to end on, but I just am devastated for couples where one person, usually the woman, is in serious physical pain and just dealing with it because she thinks she has to. And I often hear from the men in that situation where they've not known that she's experiencing pain, and they'll be so sad, and they'll say to me, if I had ever known, I would have never continued doing the thing that was painful. Why would I do that? Why would I want to inflict pain on this person that I love? So stop. Like, physical pain is totally unacceptable. Stop, get the help, do the investment, it's always going to be worth it.
Jo, finally, this is a podcast about retirement. How are you planning your own transition into retirement when the time comes?
No, is avoiding a strategy?
No.
We talk about it financially, of course. I think that's what comes top of mind when I think about retiring. But the other thing that we do dream about is where we might live, what kind of life we might do differently. So my husband loves boats and sailing. And so it's like, could we move on to a boat for a short period of time that might help us like have less expenses? But what are the things, because we might have more time, what are the things that we could do that would be really nourishing and life-giving, and that as a result becomes something you look forward to? So as opposed to seeing this as a deterioration of life, where could our life become more amazing because we have the resource of time? That's probably, I think, is part of the preparation for us is the dreaming.
Awesome. So Jo, thanks very much for joining today. It's been a thoughtful and refreshing conversation about a topic that's really important but probably doesn't get discussed openly quite as much as it should. I've really appreciated your insights and practical advice around relationships, intimacy and aging and connection. Jo, thanks for joining us on the Retire Well podcast.
You're so welcome.
Well, Martin, that was a really interesting conversation with Jo. I think one of the things that stood out for me was what she had to say about the challenges around intimacy and relationships and how they're actually a lot more common than people realise.
Yeah, it does seem that way, whether it's changes in libido or experiencing physical discomfort or adapting to spending more time with each other. They're often just part of the natural transition that occurs as we all move into retirement.
Yeah, and another point that resonated with me was what she had to say about not making assumptions.
Yeah, Jo's message was very clear on that. If you're wondering what your partner is thinking, don't guess, just ask.
Yeah, which sounds, I guess, kind of obvious, but it's remarkable how we can spend weeks stewing about something when it could be resolved with a 5-minute conversation.
Yeah. But hey, look, I do understand that asking someone who's, a bit sensitive and prickly isn't always the easiest thing to do. Hey, Jimmy, one thing that is still on my mind after this conversation is what Jo mentioned about foam aids and furniture. I can't imagine walking into Harvey Norman asking for a new lazy boy that gets my hips in the right position.
Yes, I think the sales assistant would have a few follow-up questions.
Yeah, and I think that'd probably suggest that you get the extended warranty.
Yes, Martin. Well, I think we've learnt a few new things today.
Indeed, Jim, I think we have. Well, that about wraps up episode 8 of Retire Well. Thanks for tuning in, and a big thanks to Jo for joining us.
And if you found the topics helpful, please consider giving the show a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop us a comment if there's any particular area of finance, retirement planning, or how to live your best life in retirement that you'd like us to cover in future episodes.
See you next time.